Good morning or afternoon and welcome. I am Dr. Joanne Yanez. I'm the Executive Director for the Association of Accredited Naturopathic Medical Colleges, and I'm welcoming to you today to Be Your Best Self, Natural Approaches to Weight Loss and Weight Management with Dr. Afsoun Khalili. We will be beginning the webinar in just about 2 minutes, so hold tight and we will be starting shortly. Thank you so much for coming.
Dr. Shapoval, please report to reception. Dr. Shapoval, please report to reception. Thank you.
I can't hear you.
Can you hear me now? It helps if I unmute myself, I think. That's wonderful.
Thank you.
So good morning or afternoon. Welcome to Be Your Best Self, Natural Approaches to Weight Loss, Weight Management with Dr. Afsoun Khalili. Dr. Khalili is a naturopathic doctor practicing in Toronto and a graduate of the Canadian College of Naturopathic Medicine. Now, she has a wonderful wealth of history and very thriving practice, and also is the associate professor and clinical faculty member at the CCNM clinic. She lectures, she sees patients, and she is just a wonderful soul. And so I am so glad to introduce her for you all today. But before we get started, I just want to do a little bit of housekeeping. So you will see, if you look on the corner of your screen, if you're logged on the web, that you will have a little open up your text box, and there's a section here for questions. And so all attendees will be in listen-only mode. However, we will be taking questions and answers throughout the course of the webinar. I'll do as much as I can and answer as many as I can myself. And then after the webinar is over, we will take a Q&A section. So if you have any questions, please feel free to drop them in the question box. We will also be recording this webinar, and we'll have it available on our website probably in the next day or so. So thank you all for coming, and with that, I'm going to mute myself now and turn it over to Dr. Khalili. Thank you for coming.
Thank you so much for your introduction, and hello everybody. Thank you for being here. It's a pleasure for me to do this webinar with you today. I am trying to change my slides, and for some reason it's not changing. Okay. So I'm forever inspired by this quote from Thomas Edison, which I'm sure many of you have already heard, where he says, "The doctor of the future will give no medicine, but will interest his patient in the care of the human frame, in diet, and in the cause and prevention of disease." I feel Thomas Edison was describing us as naturopathic doctors and what we do. So my story, I did my undergraduate degree in biochemistry at Concordia University in Montreal. And then I worked for a few years. I was doing some research work, and I was working in a lab, and I wasn't really loving what I was doing. And I started researching different professions, sort of looking to see what I would do. And perhaps because of the stress of looking and finding what my calling was going to be, I was having many health challenges myself. And it's a long story, but eventually I went to visit a naturopathic doctor in Montreal. She was a graduate of the National College of Naturopathic Medicine in the United States, and started feeling better and noticed a significant difference in terms of how she was approaching my case and how she was treating me. And It was really wonderful to work with her.
Please go back to your patient. Thank you.
And while I was seeing her in her treatment room, she had the naturopathic oath. And every time I would go, I would read the oath, and it resonated with me with my philosophy of service to humanity. And so I decided to apply to naturopathic medicine. I started in the program in January of 2000. Here at the Canadian College of Naturopathic Medicine, we have the program offered twice in a sort of the start of the program is twice in a year. Either you could do the September start or the January start. So I was the January start. So as a result, I'd completed the program in 3.5 years. And then after that, I did my residency here at the college, and that was for 2 years. And initially, I became assistant professor and then eventually associate professor, and I have been here since. And throughout all this time, I've maintained a private practice, and I co-own a private practice called Khalili and Associates here in Toronto, which is actually near the college. So I also see my private practice patients at the same time as I teach here. My areas of focus sort of came with time, but definitely gastrointestinal disorders. That's what I suffered from myself. And that's what inspired me to seek naturopathic medicine and then eventually become a naturopathic doctor. And then, of course, endocrine disorders are another area of passion and sort of an area that I feel very strongly about. And that's how the weight loss piece comes into sort of play in terms of what I do with patients, in terms of helping them lose weight. And there's other endocrine disorders that I treat, of course, too. And what I find challenging is managing my full-time work and being a mom and being physically active and cooking healthy meals and following a paleo diet and following my hobbies and other things that I'm passionate about. So that's sort of what I haven't been able to sort of find that right balance for myself yet. I think I work more than I do the other stuff, but hopefully one day I'll figure it out. So when I was a resident here at CCNM and I was doing my residency, I noticed that our patients who came for weight loss had a hard time relating to their interns. Because most interns, most of us are healthy and we don't have a ton of extra weight to lose. We're within our sort of healthy weight range. And so patients came and they sort of, the feedback they gave us overwhelmingly, if they were obese especially, was that they felt like they couldn't really relate to their interns. Since I was always very passionate about healthy eating and helping patients with weight loss, I created the Be Your Best Self program in the fall of 2004. And at the time, I had fourth-year interns that helped me create the program. And then eventually in January of 2005, we launched the program, and the program has been running since. The name Be Your Best Self was inspired by Oprah. When I was looking to find what to call the program, I had picked up one of her magazines, and I don't know if she still does this, but at the time with her magazines, at the very end, she always had an article where she would write about sort of, her challenges or her thoughts or her sort of things that she had learned. And she talked about focusing on being one's best self. And I thought that would be a great name for our program. So thank you, Oprah. You don't know I exist, but you've inspired me. So Be Your Best Self is a comprehensive, systematic weight management program that encourages lifestyle modification for weight loss. And the idea is that the changes that the patient makes become lifelong changes. The entire program is evidence-based and based on new data, new research, new cases. We always change and fine-tune things within the program. It's healthy and holistic, and what that means is that we focus on healthy eating, we focus on eating whole foods, and it's holistic because we try to address all the different aspects of weight in the program with a patient. Our goal is to provide an environment where the participants can make internal paradigm shifts so that they can make lifestyle changes and as a result lose weight and maintain it long term. And most of the weight loss programs that exist what they have a hard time with is helping participants maintain their weight loss. And so that's why we focus on maintenance from the very beginning of the program. The attendance of the support groups on a weekly basis is mandatory. And the reason is the program is only 6 weeks long. And of course, in 6 weeks, people are not going to lose all their weight, but it's basically just providing them with the tools that they would need to make the changes that they need. And then they can sort of continue doing the things that they're doing and be followed up with their intern and the supervising naturopathic doctor at our teaching clinic. But the attendance is mandatory because in 6 weeks, if they miss one of the lectures or one of the sort of meetings, they end up losing a lot. So we usually tell people to try to attend all of the support groups. And what's interesting to see within the 6 weeks of running the program, the participants become each other's support network. And that's really lovely to see. And in the weekly meetings, we do PowerPoint presentations where we provide motivation, encouragement, and moral support because most people who have worked with people who want to lose weight, or if you have weight challenges yourself, you know that keeping oneself motivated can be very challenging. The program does repeat itself. So it runs every 6 weeks. We have a few weeks off, and then we repeat the program again. The support group meetings are usually held on a Monday, and that's because most studies that look at weight loss have shown that people wake up on a Monday morning and promise themselves that they're going to eat better and be healthier during the week. So the best time that some of these studies suggest having a support group meeting is on a Monday. Excuse me. The support group meetings are for an hour and a half. The first 40 to 50 minutes, we do a presentation on a topic that's related to weight loss and healthy lifestyle change. The second part is when people participate and talk about their challenges, or they ask questions, or they share success stories, or whatever it is that they want to bring up. Some of the topics we cover have to do with things like, what's a healthy diet? What's the definition of a healthy diet? What are the ABCs, the sort of the ABCs of eating? That's what I call them. So like, what's a carbohydrate? What's a complex carbohydrate? What's a simple carbohydrate? What's a protein? What are animal-based proteins? What are plant-based proteins? How do you make a complete protein if you're vegetarian or vegan? We talk about different types of fats. We talk about trans fats. We talk about how to read labels and ingredients. So when you want to buy a product, how do you know if it's healthy for you? How do you know it's good for you? And then we have a whole evening that we dedicate to cooking healthy. So we actually cook with our participants. We have a menu, and the participants actually cook their own food. And that's really important, I have found over the years, because most people think cooking healthy is difficult or time consuming. And over the years of doing this, I think it's great to see how people finally realize when they do the cooking class with us that cooking healthy doesn't need to be time consuming. And it is actually very easy and, more importantly, tasty. We talk about food sensitivities. We talk about the importance of eliminating foods that the participants might be sensitive to. We talk about caffeine, gluten, dairy. We debunk some of the myths that might be out there. We talk about the importance of physical activity. And this one's another important one because I think as soon as we say physical activity, many of our participants think that they have to go join a gym and do 2 hours of cardio and weights. So we talk a little bit about how it doesn't necessarily have to be that. And then, of course, a large focus for us is emotional eating. We have found in the Be Your Best Self that many of our participants are emotional eaters, which is why the issues and the challenge with weight persists for them over the years. We do a grocery shopping trip where we take our participants to a grocery store that's near the college here, and we basically show them what healthy shopping is like. We have some of our PowerPoint presentation slides focus on cravings and how to manage cravings, and what are some things that they can do when they have very strong cravings for specific foods, for example. Stress management and relaxation and learning to even breathe and tackle things like anxiety and depression are a huge part of the program as well. And what I have found working with patients over the years, and also from some of the studies that I've looked at and other programs that I've looked at, stress seems to be the sort of common cause of people going back to their unhealthy lifestyle. So things get too stressful, people get overwhelmed, and then they're unable to maintain their healthy lifestyle. So we talk about sort of strategies around that, what to do. We also talk about prevention of things like cardiovascular disease and diabetes, and then how menopause and andropause can affect weight as people age. We talk about thyroid issues and sort of fatigue, and fatigue tends to be one of the number one reason of why people aren't physically active when they join our program. And so addressing that is very, very important. As I mentioned earlier, we talk about maintenance from the start, because maintenance is such a big part of being able to lose weight and keep the weight off. So when you look at various studies that talk about why people gain weight, the reasons are multifactorial. And research shows that all those factors have to be addressed for successful weight loss. And this is why the Be Your Best Self has such a wide variety of topics that we cover, because we really want to make sure that we cover sort of all those areas, all those factors that could be contributing to someone's weight. With a diet, we usually do an individualized approach. So we have our patients at the same time as they're doing the support groups, see one of our interns at our teaching clinic, and that really helps us come up with an individualized plan for the patient, because not one diet fits all, and you really have to look at the patient, look at their needs, look at their likes, look at their dislikes, their cravings, all of those things to come up with a plan that suits the patient best, because the diet has to be realistic for the patient. If it's not realistic, they won't be able to do it long term. Physical activity I already mentioned, and then the emotional status and mood is also very important. And we all have an emotional relationship with food. I think we can all look back at our childhood and think of memories around food and eating, and of course, Thanksgiving, Christmas. Many of our sort of festive times of the year are surrounding food and around food. So food is very important from an emotional perspective in our lives. So we talk to patients about what food means to them. What are the types of foods that they have an emotional relationship with? What are the types of foods that perhaps they might overeat because they want to, say, cope with stress or cope with their mood or cope with some of the things that are happening in their life? The other thing that we do is we set realistic goals. And this happens mainly in the one-to-one visits with our interns, because again, many people, when they join the program, say, someone's a size 22, clothing size 22, and then they want to be a size 6. And I'm not saying that if someone's a size 22, they can't be a size 6, but certainly to go from a size 22 to a size 6, it's very daunting. And having that as a goal can be unrealistic. And typically what I have found is when someone has that type of a goal, it's kind of they failed from the beginning, because even if they lose 5 pounds, they don't feel excited about it. So when we set realistic goals, we try to set goals that are manageable. And once they achieve that goal, then we set new goals. And little by little, that's how our patients are able to lose weight and then maintain the weight. Self-awareness and self-monitoring is something that we promote in our visits with our patients, as well as in the support group, because we're not in people's house. We don't know what they're eating. We don't know what they're doing. So we encourage the patient to become, sort of honest with themselves in terms of what they're eating, what choices they're making, and then how to monitor themselves. And most programs that are successful with weight loss encourage patients to keep a journal of their food, a diet diary, so to speak. And we do that as well. And we have a journal that we've created with positive quotes and affirmations where the patients can sort of monitor their diet and write what they're eating. And then, of course, stimulus control and managing stress, I've already mentioned, big part of supporting the patient. Even in the one-to-one, we talk about those. And then cognitive restructuring, because many people eat because it's time to eat. So they don't pay attention to their body. They don't pay attention to the fact that, are they even hungry when they're eating? Or are they just eating because they have a desire to eat? Or is it because, oh, there's chips and they like eating chips? Or is it because there's cake and they want to eat cake? So we talk about that as well, sort of helping patients understand what hunger is and encouraging them to eat when they're hungry. Of course, we don't want them to wait till they're famished, because when they're famished, then they're going to want to eat everything. But we also don't want them to eat just because food is available. We talk about relapse prevention, and we have a sort of huge focus on mindfulness. Eating mindfully, eating slowly, not eating in front of the TV, not eating on the go, not eating while driving, not eating in front of the computer, all of those things. Because I think it's Brian Wansink who's written the book Mindless Eating. He talks about how people can eat up to 200 or 300 calories more per day because they're not eating mindfully. Social support that we provide through the Be Your Best Self support group meetings. And then supplementation, if needed, happens after, of course, we do extensive assessment through blood work and various tests. And then if there's deficiencies or if we think that the patient needs more support, we supplement accordingly. But that's in the one-on-one with the intern and the supervising naturopathic doctor. So the World Health Organization's definition of obesity is someone who has a body mass index of 30 or more. And I realize body mass index is not accurate. And I realize that if someone's doing a lot of weight training and they have a lot of muscle mass, BMIs are not necessarily accurate for them, but we still do use them as a way of monitoring our patients. We don't put a ton of emphasis on them, but it's really just to help us see if our patient is sort of coming out of those higher BMIs into the lower BMIs and healthier BMIs. So I'm going to share a case from one of our patients who is still a patient here, and she's doing quite well. This patient is a teacher. She's a mother of two. At the time when she came, she was a mother of two teenagers. Her daughters are no longer teenagers now, but they were when she came here. And she was 50 years old. And she had gained about 60 pounds over the last few years of her life in her 40s. But then in the past 2 years, more recently, she had put on most of that weight. She had been overweight as a child and basically all throughout her life. She had done a ton of yo-yo dieting. She had tried various diets over the years. And she found her work very stressful. And she also found her teenagers very stressful. She told us that she was an emotional eater, and she was also a compulsive overeater. And she also shared with us that she had body image issues. She didn't like her body, and the way she was dressed, she was wearing very loose clothing, all black, kind of trying to hide her body. She said that she had a weakness for baked goods and cheese. And when I say that she had a weakness for cheese, she was able to eat an entire block of cheese in one sitting. Same with chocolate. She was able to eat, like those large chocolate bars in one sitting. And when we asked her what had happened over the last 2 years, she said nothing significant had happened, but she had come off the Bernstein diet. So I don't know if the Bernstein diet exists in the United States, but in Canada, Dr. Bernstein diet is a diet where people are put on very, very low calories, between 500 and 800 calories a day, and they get vitamin B12 shots, and they lose weight very quickly. And it's a great way, I guess, if someone wants to lose weight very quickly, for them to lose weight very, very quickly. But the problem with it is most people aren't able to maintain their weight loss. And when they do gain the weight, they gain back even more weight than what they first had to lose. So when we measured her height, she was 5'4", and she weighed 195 pounds. And her lowest weight had been in her 20s, which was when she was 125 pounds. And when I asked her how she felt when she was 125 pounds, she said even at that weight, she felt like she was fat and she was uncomfortable. And sort of that's where the body image comes into play as well. Her highest weight was when she was pregnant, and she was about 210 pounds. And that was over 14 years ago when she had her second daughter. Some of her past medical history, she had a history of varicose veins, mild depression, And she was getting migraine headaches less frequently, sort of now when she was 50, but still she was getting them once in a while. And though she was perimenopausal, her periods were still normal. She also told us that she had seasonal allergies. Her parents were both in good health. Her grandparents on both sides had died of old age. And her paternal grandmother was the one who was obese. She told us that her mother had been very critical of her weight. She remembered her mom putting her on her first diet for weight loss when she was 12 years old. Her husband was very supportive, but he wasn't necessarily helpful because he would buy breads and he would buy cheeses and chocolate, all the things that sort of she liked to eat. So she didn't find him as supportive as she wanted him to be. And she also mentioned that her friends were a bad influence. Whenever they got together, they went, for coffee and baked goods. So that's kind of what they would do when they would get together. When we looked at her diet and lifestyle, she wasn't physically active, and she hadn't been physically active for years. She rated her stress as 8 out of 10, 10 being the highest stress she's ever experienced. And her 24-hour diet recall revealed lots of cheese and dairy in general, lots of breads and baked goods and chocolate and those kinds of things. When we did her physical exam, her vitals were within normal range. Her body mass index was 33.47, so around the obese range. And her hip to waist ratio was 0.75. So the majority of her weight was distributed in her thighs and in her hips, which in a way is protective against cardiovascular disease. But of course, she didn't like it because she didn't like her legs, she didn't like her thighs, she didn't like her lower abdomen, she didn't like her hips. And this was contributing to her body image disorder. She did have varicose veins present in both of her legs, and she had very cold feet. And there was slight edema in both her ankles, so slight swelling in both her ankles. Her heart, lungs, and abdomen were within normal limits. The last PAP, what had been performed by her MD 4 months prior to our visit, and everything had been within normal limits. And all of her blood work, so her CBC with differentials, her thyroid stimulating hormone, her fasting blood sugar levels, her hemoglobin A1C, which is an indicator of, if it's elevated, it's an indicator of being pre-diabetic. Her blood lipids, her liver enzymes were all within normal range. So we started her with some dietary changes, and we did things very slowly because I have found over the years that if you do too many things at the same time, patients can get overwhelmed and then they can't continue doing it. So we made some dietary changes, and we just asked her to increase her physical activity. And when I asked her what type of physical activity she enjoyed, she said she enjoyed walking. So we just encouraged her to start walking. And initially it was like, can you do 30 minutes of walking a day? And we wanted her to walk at a pace where she felt like her heart rate was rising. So we tried to keep things very, very simple. We did a little bit of supplementation with her, and we did put some focus on addressing her body image issues, and we even referred her to see a therapist with a focus on body image. And we also addressed some of her mental emotional issues in the visit with us, but also through the therapist that we referred her to. And then she joined the Be Your Best Self program. In the first year that she worked with us, she lost about 40 pounds. And in the second year, she lost another 25 pounds and was able to bring her weight down to 130. Currently, her weight fluctuates between 130 and 135 pounds, and she's very happy with her weight. She told us that if previously she would get to this weight, she wouldn't be happy with it. She would still feel like she was fat. But through the therapy that she's been receiving and working with sort of addressing her mental emotional issues and her body image issues, she's able to, love herself, love her body, and appreciate the weight that she's at. And she's been able to keep her weight off now for the past 6 years, which I consider to be successful. So why naturopathic medicine, and why did I choose to do naturopathic medicine, and why did I base sort of Be Your Best Self on naturopathic medicine? Well, it's a very complete and holistic approach to healthcare. And what I love about naturopathic medicine is that we don't just focus on addressing the disease, so to speak, and treating the disease, but we also focus on prevention. And we try to use therapies that are gentle and supportive of the body, and therapies that are not harmful to the body. As naturopathic doctors, we're trained to be primary healthcare providers, and we try to integrate scientific knowledge and traditional medicine together to get the best sort of approach in terms of treating a patient. Naturopathic oath, as I mentioned earlier, and the naturopathic principles are a source of inspiration for me on a daily basis. Really, our principles of doing no harm, identifying and treating the cause of disease whenever possible, emphasizing prevention, empowering our patients, caring about their health and the health of our environment are all things that I personally find very, very inspiring. And really, the naturopathic principles are really the tenets of good medicine. That's what they are. They're very similar to the teachings of Hippocrates, who developed the oath of medical ethics. And what he talked about was treat the body as a whole, respect natural healing processes of rest, good diet, fresh air, cleanliness, and respecting the individuality of patients, which really is the definition of naturopathic medicine in my mind. We have many modalities that we use, and I think in the United States, the modalities are a little bit different from Canada. I believe traditional Chinese medicine might be separate in most schools. But here for us, our modalities include, of course, diet and clinical nutrition, counseling, whether it be lifestyle counseling, nutritional counseling, or psychological counseling. We use herbs and botanical medicine in the treatment of various conditions, physical medicine, so things like hydrotherapy, naturopathic manipulation, physiotherapy, exercise therapy. Homeopathy is another modality that we use, and of course, traditional Chinese medicine and acupuncture here in Canada. L.R. Cass, who's actually a medical doctor, and he was, I believe he went to Harvard, if I'm not mistaken, and was teaching at one of the universities in Chicago for a number of years. He talks about what the definition of health is, and I think it's he's very naturopathic in his thinking. He says, it is not mere life or even a healthy life, but rather a good and worthy life which we must aim for which we must aim. And while poor health may weaken our efforts, good health alone is an insufficient condition and sign of a worthy human life. So in terms of what are my future plans, from a career perspective, I would love to be able to bring naturopathic medicine to the hospital setting here in Toronto and in Ontario. I think as naturopathic doctors, we can contribute to the well-being of patients in a hospital setting in terms of the recovery from surgeries, recovery in general from being at the hospital, from anything that brought them to the hospital in the first place, focusing on nutrition. I don't know about the United States, but I know here in Toronto, the diet and the food that's given in the hospitals is not very nutritious, is not high in antioxidants and fiber and all those things. And then on a personal level, I would like to bring more balance into my life. I'm forever searching for the right balance. And I hope to be a good mom for my daughter. And hopefully I can support her to be a critical thinker, independent, strong, and find her way in this world. In terms of advice for prospective students, if some of you are planning on applying to naturopathic medicine and becoming future naturopathic doctors, what I wish I knew, I think it's important to know that there's a lot you can do with naturopathic medicine. I think traditionally we think, oh, you become a naturopath and then you open up a practice, or if you're interested in academia, you also teach at a naturopathic college. But more and more, I see our students, our graduates, getting involved with different areas. We have naturopathic doctors in Canada that are part of the health care team on the provincial and on the federal level. Health Canada has several naturopathic doctors employed who work for them. There are naturopathic doctors who go into research, and some of whom work at various universities here in Ontario or around the different provinces in Canada. They're in research, though they're naturopaths. They're working with sort of the conventional side to help bring more efficacy and more validity to what we do. And I think there's probably other areas that some of you, when you join and become students and eventually naturopathic doctors, may think of that we haven't even thought of yet to sort of participate in and sort of be active in. There's also naturopathic doctors internationally working with people who are in third world countries and they want to use naturopathic medicine, so there's people who do that. The other thing that I think is really important if you are going to become a naturopath is definitely write your board exams and write them as quickly as possible, close to when you've graduated, because that's when the information is fresh in your minds, and that's when you can succeed. Really, it's sort of you can pass your exams more easily, I would say. And then, of course, if you're going to become a naturopath, you need to know that you're going to be running a business. So it's important to, when you're shadowing a naturopathic doctor, or if you go to someone's practice, look to see how they're also running their business. And what I wish I knew is I wish I had maybe taken more courses in terms of how to run a business. Of course, now I've been in practice for many, many years, so I've learned those things over the years, but I think it would have been nice to have had some background in business before I did naturopathic medicine. That's all I've got in terms of sharing with you today. I don't know if anybody has any questions. If you want to contact me, akhalili@ccnm.edu. That's my email here at CCNM. You can also write to our private practice at khalilizambri.com, and they will forward your emails to me there as well. And I'm open to any questions anyone might have. Thank you for having me today. It's been a pleasure spending this time with you, even though I don't see any of you.
Thank you so very much. Would you be able to go to the next slide just really quickly so that I can talk about the upcoming events? Thank you. So thank you so much, first off, for a wonderful discussion here around, and when I think of weight loss per se, I love the Be Your Best Self, because there is no one right or wrong. There's no one size fits all diet. And I think that is really where naturopathic medicine excels, is that we address that individual person and we meet them where they're at. Yes. So if this was interesting to you and you are considering a career in naturopathic medicine, we have our upcoming virtual fair on April 11th. We also have a webinar on how to apply to ND school on April 18th. And then in May, our next webinar focuses on hormones and PMS. So hope that if any of these are interesting for you, that you can come and join us. And so with that, I am going to send you over some questions here. Oh, they're coming in fast and furious. So Dr. Khalili, there were a few questions here from folks about supplementation. And I know that you mentioned in your case, you use supplements with the patient. I think oftentimes I've seen folks come in and they want, hey, just give me a supplement for weight loss without doing the rest of the work that you talked about, because it is really a multifactorial approach. But if you could briefly just cover supplementation and what types of things you may do with patients depending on what's appropriate.
Initially, we do make the dietary changes. I mean, that's sort of what we focus on. But if we notice that, say, someone's thyroid is sluggish, we might do supplementation around supporting the thyroid or supporting the liver, or things like green tea extract, things that might help increase the patient's metabolism. The reason I don't want to go into detail is because we don't have a cookie cutter approach. It really is very much individualized. So I don't necessarily give the green tea extract with every single patient who wants to lose weight, for example. But when it's necessary, when the time comes, if we feel like someone's plateaued, they're not moving forward, or their metabolism isn't where it needs to be, we may consider some of the supplements that we do. So if the patient's, for example, constipated, then the supplementation's around giving them more fiber and trying to get them to sort of move things out of their system more quickly and have regular bowel movements on a regular basis. So the supplementation really is individualized to the person. It's not one sort of glove fitting all. I don't know if that answered people's questions satisfactorily, but hopefully it did.
Thank you so much. I've got a couple questions here, and one is interesting for me personally. So there's a question here about balancing, and you mentioned this a little bit, balancing your professional life and personal life.
Yes.
I think, anyone who is, especially a parent of small children, mom or dad, or you're always juggling something, and so I think we all struggle. Some days are better than others. For me, there's some days where I'm like, yeah, I rock this day out, and there are other days where I feel like I haven't had a chance to have enough coffee yet. So, but if you could speak maybe to, the how you balance that, and use the tools that you were given in naturopathic medical school to help first identify and know what you need to be doing for balance, and then how you accomplish that for yourself.
That's an excellent question, and like I said, I'm exactly like you. It's like, it depends on the day. There's good days and better days, and some bad days as well. For the most part, for me, because what brought me to naturopathic medicine as a patient was inflammatory bowel disease and gastrointestinal disorders. So I really focus on having do my best to have a really clean diet. I do liver detoxes at least once a year in spring. In fact, this coming weekend, I'm going to start my detox. And I find that's really helpful even for stress management, like eating a healthy diet, being physically active. I work out pretty much every day. I wake up very early to do that. And for me, my philosophy is family comes before work. So if my daughter needs me, if I have a 5-year-old, so she's still very little, and I only have the one child, but even at that, I feel like there are times where I'm needed at home, I make time for it. There have been times if she's been sick, I've canceled my patients and called my practice, and I've asked them to rebook the patients at a later date so I can be there for my daughter. And I do my best to attend all the school activities. I try to find out about them in advance, and I sort of carve it into my schedule. I also am a big believer of physician heal thyself and take care of thyself. So I have a naturopathic doctor that I see. It's so easy for us as naturopaths to treat ourselves, and I did that for years, but I try very hard to not do that. I take a lot of supplements myself. And when I go see a naturopath, I really try to not be the naturopath in the visit and become the patient. And then meditation, guided visualizations, positive affirmations, as fluffy as they may sound, I find them profoundly helpful in terms of managing stress. And then I believe in the power of prayer. So I pray daily. I pray for my patients. I pray for my family. I pray all the time, even for humanity. And I find that really, really helpful as well. I try to get to bed early. Getting enough sleep is a big piece, I think, in terms of having that balance. Spending time with my husband as well. Sometimes we do date nights, not as frequently as we'd like, but we try to do it at least, once, every few weeks, couple of weeks. And then I try to remain current, like if there's movies, if there's articles, if there's a book, fiction, I try to read. I try to keep, I don't want to be one of those people where someone's talking about something and I have no idea what they're saying, because I haven't kept, myself sort of on top of what are people doing? What are they watching? I don't have a lot of time to watch TV, so I'd say that's the one thing I don't do as much. But if I do watch something, it'll be something that is either like a movie or something on Netflix, and it will be, something that I really enjoy. I don't necessarily watch things on TV that, are going to cause stress. But like I said, the diet, the lifestyle diet and the working out is a big part of how I manage my stress.
Thank you so much. So there are a couple follow-up questions here. I think that, you know, overall folks are definitely wanting to think about, uh, you know, there were a number of questions about medication, but hold on, let me find this.
Okay.
So there are questions that are coming in about you know, more specific types of food guidance and how NDs approach that for the individual. But also, you know, the case that you provided was of a probably perimenopausal woman, and so can you address maybe some of the you know, how we work with patients where there may be more of an endocrine component and perimenopause increasing weight gain?
Okay, so in terms of diet, um, what I've learned is, you know, initially when I started, it was like, well, let's do a ketogenic diet for everybody. And then I noticed there's a lot of people who are not able to do the ketogenic diet. Some people are fast metabolizers, some are slow metabolizers, some are balanced metabolizers. People are very, very different in terms of how they assimilate and metabolize foods. Also, people have likes and dislikes in terms of what they like to eat, what they don't eat. And then there's some people who are vegan or vegetarian, and it's a belief thing. They don't want to harm animals. So the diet that we come up with is based on all of those things. So when I look at somebody, if somebody tells me, I don't like eating chicken, fish, and meat, I'm not going to put them on a Paleolithic diet. That's not going to work for them. They won't be able to maintain it. Having said that, there have been times where, say, a patient came and they were vegetarian, and then over time, the patient themselves also realized that the vegetarian diet was what was contributing to their weight. And when they, say, switched to paleo, they were able to lose weight. So there's that too. But basically, when I say the diet is individualized, that's what I mean. We look to see, I usually look to see also how the patient records their diet diary, because we do a diet diary with all our patients at least for 7 days. And then we look at their patterns. If I see someone's eating a lot of carbohydrates, a lot of simple carbs, then of course that's where I'm going to go. I'm going to reduce all of those things. Some people eat really well through the week, and then they have 2 nights where they, you know, they're compulsive overeaters. So they may consume large calories in a short period of time. So then we're going to address that a little bit differently. So hopefully I answered the question about the diet, but that's basically how we go about the diet. We really look at the patient, and I listen. When patients are talking, I listen very carefully to what they're telling me, because the patient is really providing the solutions in what they're sharing with us. And that helps me in terms of providing them with a diet plan that is going to be doable for them. The other thing that I've learned with respect to diet is initially when patients come, let's say someone has no idea about naturopathic medicine and eating healthy. If I tell them, say, eat quinoa, they're like, what? What is that? So there's a lot of education that needs to happen. So little by little, sometimes we make the dietary changes. So if someone's diet is very processed, they're eating out all the time, they're eating a lot of like deep fried, fast food type foods, then what I do is I initially just say, let's have some home cooked meals. You know, here are some recipes, here's some foods. Like we start very, very slowly. The only time that I make the changes quickly is if the patient says, I'm ready, I want to make the changes quickly, so then we just go for it. But for the most part, we do things in stages and we do them gradually, and I have found that takes longer, yes, but the patient is able to maintain it long term. In terms of the patient that I shared, and she was perimenopausal, so she was still getting her periods regularly. But what we did is eventually we did a 4-point salivary cortisol with a female hormone panel test. And we looked to see how she was, sort of, because she was very stressed. So we looked to see sort of how she was doing with her cortisol, if it was higher certain times of the day. And then we also looked at her estradiol, progesterone, her DHEA, testosterone. We looked at all of those things. And yes, we did provide botanical support based on her deficiencies and what they were. So at the time, I remember we ended up doing some progestinic herbs for her. We also, her cortisol levels were low in the morning. First thing in the morning, they were lower, but they would increase at night. So we sort of helped with adaptogenic herbs. We helped support her natural circadian rhythm. And it took time, but gradually we started seeing changes. And then we redid the 4-point salivary cortisol test. I think it was about, I want to say 4 to 6 months later. I can't remember exactly when we did it again. And there was a definite change in her hormones. She didn't really go through menopause the way some people go through, because she was losing a lot of weight as she was going through menopause. And she increased her physical activity. And that made a big difference. Eventually, she even got a trainer. Again, like I said, we do things in stages, right? When she first came, she wasn't even open to exercising. And then eventually, she was even getting a trainer for herself. So I think doing things in stages was really helpful. And then she didn't really have hot flashes when she went through menopause. She initially, I remember her periods became heavier for a while, and then gradually they became lighter and lighter, and then eventually she stopped having her periods. So hopefully this answered the questions.
Thank you so much. So there are still a bunch of questions coming through.
Sure.
Let's see. Can you talk a little bit about carbs and fats? There's a lot of question and back and forth in literature now on low carb, no carb, vegetarian, vegan, maybe how you help patients determine what's best for them.
That's a great question. So in terms of carbohydrates, I would say for most people, simple carbohydrates are not a good way to go, probably for everybody. Having said that, I tend to be sort of moderate. And what I mean by that is, sometimes what we might do is, if someone says, you know what, I really love eating my simple carbs, then what I might do is I might say, why don't you have a free day, or you have 3 free meals through the week? And that helps people sort of eat the things that they like to eat. What I have also found is when people do that, it reduces the cravings because they're not feeling deprived. Having said that, again, for the most part, we want our patients to eat whole foods. We want them to eat foods as close to nature as possible. We want them to eat whole grains, if any. With some people, if, say, the patient comes and they also have small intestinal bacterial overgrowth, or they have leaky gut or IBS, they have a lot of gas and bloating, and the patient says, you know what, every time I eat grains, I get really bloated, we may actually take all grains out in the beginning. And then eventually, if the patient wants, we can slowly introduce the grains back one by one and see how they feel when they eat them. So again, I individualize it to the chief concerns and what the patient has come in with. If they're diabetic, we may do more of a ketogenic diet, especially initially. And maybe we do intermittent fasting with the patients because, that helps regulate their blood sugar. It also helps them lose weight. So I know people want I think people want me to just have this is the approach. But the truth of the matter is I don't use one approach. Every individual is different. So we have a patient, she has been able to lose about, I think now 48 pounds or so since last December, so December of 2016. She's lost about 48 pounds just by doing intermittent fasting and avoiding grains. So that really worked for her. But then I have patients where they avoid grains. They say, you know what, when I avoid grains, I can't function. My brain doesn't work. So those are the people where we add the grains back. But then the grains that they do, it depends on their sensitivities. If, say, gluten-containing grains bother them, then we do non-gluten-containing grains. But there are some people that are okay eating gluten-containing grains. So we just tell them eat whole grains if they're going to, whatever they're going to be. And then we talk about portion sizes with those people. Because often I have found when people are eating carbs, their portions are more than what their body needs. So we talk about portion sizes. I'm not a huge fan of simple carbs, but if someone says, I love my pasta, again, I'll say, well, you have 3 free meals a week. So if you want to have pasta, you can do pasta. But then if they want to do pasta, we suggest some of the better sort of sources of pasta, pasta that's perhaps high in fiber, or if they have a gluten sensitivity, pasta that's gluten-free. Although many of the gluten-free pastas actually are high glycemic index. So then we talk about, okay, well then why don't you eat your pasta with a good amount of protein and a good amount of fat, and then that way it won't spike your glycemic index. With a diabetic patient, the diet we might do might be more of a glycemic index type diet or a ketogenic type diet. And then intermittent fasting for women, we typically don't do it every day because we have found, especially women who are menstruating, it can affect their hormones adversely. So they might do it 3 or maybe 4 times a week. But postmenopausal women, in my experience, seem to be okay doing intermittent fasting on a daily basis. So again, the approach really depends on the patient needs, their chief concerns, their symptoms, their blood work, and any other assessment tools that we might use.
Thank you. Okay, we've got time for maybe a couple more questions here. Let's see. First off, though, there are a few students who are asking questions about, and I just wanted to jump in here, Dr. Khalili, really quickly, about if you're too old to start naturopathic school, and I just want to address this. You're never too old for ND school. We have wonderful students, and Dr. Khalili, I'm sure that you've had students you have taught yourself who come from all different types of backgrounds. AANMC, and I shared a few links from our website, but AANMC has a number of resources and examples of people who have gone through as career changers. And so I've just seen a few questions coming in here. Sorry to step in, but maybe if you could just speak a little bit to some of the students you've taught and your experience as a supervisor at CCNM and the types of students that do well, and some of the things that you've seen in regards to that, because I'm getting a bunch of questions coming in around that.
Sure. That's also a very good question to ask. First, I want to say that in my graduating class, one of my classmates when we graduated was 65 years old. She was actually from Maine in the US, and she had come here to study naturopathic medicine. She had a history of breast cancer, and she believed that she had been saved through naturopathic treatment. So subsequently to surviving breast cancer, she came here to the college and studied naturopathic medicine. So I would agree with you. I think there's no age limit, really. What I will also say that I have found students who are more mature and perhaps have work experience and experience in the different areas tend to be more sort of well-rounded practitioners, especially when they get to 4th year. Right now on my Thursday shift, one of the interns is a 57-year-old female. She's graduating this year, and she is an amazing intern, strong intern. We have a wide variety of students, as young as 22 and as old as, I guess, 65. And again, I also find that students who are a little bit more mature are able to create a stronger rapport with their patients because I think they have that life experience. Now, if you're young, that doesn't mean that you won't succeed. You will. But I think a little bit of life experience can make a huge difference in our profession.
Thank you. Yes, and our career changers are always enriching the program with the life knowledge that they come to the table with. I've got on my on the website right now Dr. Godby, who spoke on one of our webinars a while back, and he was a religious studies teacher prior to becoming an ND. So I think people come with so many different backgrounds that really do help them. Just 1 or 2 more questions if we have time. Let's see. There was a question here about intermittent fasting, and if you could speak to maybe some of the references around that.
With intermittent fasting, the most important thing to realize is that it has to be done for the right patient. I wouldn't just do it with everybody. Having said that, I follow Jason Fung. Jason Fung is a medical doctor here in Toronto. He's actually a kidney specialist, but over the years, being a kidney specialist, he treated a lot of people with diabetes. And what he found was that when they were fasting, they were doing better. And he got very interested. He was like, well, how is that possible that when they're fasting, they're doing better? So he eventually got funding and was able to do like formal studies. And he's the person, he's written a number of books on intermittent fasting. You can also watch his YouTube videos. Jason Fung, F-U-N-G, M-D is the name. And he talks about doing the overnight 16-hour fast. And he actually even believes eventually doing the 24-hour fast with patients with diabetes specifically, but also for anybody who wants to lose weight. Here in Toronto, in the Scarborough area, he has a clinic. And some of my patients have gone to his clinic, and he's kind of become sort of a bit of a celebrity, I guess. He doesn't really see the patients. Patients don't see him, but there's a couple of NDs that actually work with him in his office as well. And basically what it is you start with overnight, or the patient starts with overnight not eating for 16 hours. They can drink water. They can drink any beverage that does not have any sugar in it. They can have a black coffee or bulletproof coffee. I don't know if you guys are familiar with bulletproof coffee, but bulletproof coffee is basically black coffee with either organic unrefined butter or organic unrefined coconut oil or MCT oil. And so people can do that. They can drink lots of water, and then 16 hours overnight they don't eat. And then basically the patient's really only having 2 meals. And then between 2 meals, there has to be at least 6 hours or 4 to 6 hours of sort of time, so that the blood sugar is not spiking through the day. And I've had great success with intermittent fasting with several patients with diabetes and even without diabetes, but for weight loss.
So we have time for maybe just one last question, and I'm going to combine a few of the last ones together. So maybe if you can speak a little bit to the component of psych and working with possibly psych referrals, body dysmorphic. I think you talked about body image issues with your patient case, as well as eating disorders, and how we make sure that we're not feeding into an eating disorder, no pun intended, but also helping to help our patients have a healthy relationship with food.
So there's different sort of ways of approaching the mental emotional. Here in Ontario, we as naturopathic doctors, psychotherapy is not part of our scope. So we're very careful in terms of the counseling that we do around emotional eating. And I'm very careful if a patient needs sort of, excuse me, more support, I will refer them to a psychotherapist who is experienced in the area of emotional eating, body image disorder, body dysmorphic disorder, that type of thing. But what we do is initially I just ask people if they're emotional eaters. And many people are very honest about it, and they say, yes, I'm an emotional eater. But some people are not. I treated a patient once who was, the diet diary she showed us, kept showing us, was just not matching what we saw. Because she was gaining weight, but she was like showing us all this healthy stuff that she's eating, and she wasn't even eating enough. We increased her caloric intake, still not losing weight. And then eventually when she felt, I think, more and more comfortable, she divulged that she was a huge emotional eater, would consume like 6,000 to 8,000 calories some days. So how do we tackle that? Well, you have to build rapport and you have to build trust. And the patient has to know that you're not going to judge them. I think that's really, really important. And then with emotional eaters, what I have found is that deprivation is not a good thing. If they feel deprived, they will continue to be an emotional eater. There was one patient one year, I remember she said, I asked her, what's her favorite thing to eat? She said, Mars bars. She said when she was a kid, her mom would buy Mars bars and then hide them and not give it to her because she was always overweight and her mom would be putting her on a diet. So she would dream about eating Mars bars. So one day when we finally did her diet, I told her, what would happen if you had a Mars bar a day? So we worked it into her plan so she could have a Mars bar a day. And this is no exaggeration. 3 weeks later, she comes back and I asked her, so how's it going eating the Mars bars every day? She started laughing. I said, why are you laughing? She goes, after a few days of having a Mars bar a day, I realized I don't like Mars bars. So the reason I share that story is because when people feel deprived in their minds, that food, whatever it is, becomes bigger than what it is. And they constantly, their mind craves it. So definitely addressing it through counseling, through doing some of the things that we do. And I like the work of Janine Roth. She's an American. She's a therapist. She's written a number of books. Breaking Free from Compulsive Overeating is one of them. Her most recent one is Food, Women, and God. But she talks about breaking free from emotional eating, feeding the hungry heart. These are some of the titles of her books. But anyway, so I use a lot of her work as well in what we do. I really like her approach and what she does, and she doesn't believe in deprivation either. And then, again, like I said, if we see that a patient needs more support than what we're able to provide, they will definitely be referred to see a therapist. And some people do need it. I mean, if there's a history of abuse or history of, things that we do not have the tools to treat, we definitely refer. And then the other thing that we do, talking about supplementation, if we notice that there's a particular neurotransmitter deficiency, then we might supplement based on the neurotransmitter deficiencies that we see. And there's different ways of addressing the neurotransmitter deficiencies, and I know we're running out of time, but that's kind of, in a nutshell, what we do for emotional eaters.
Well, thank you so very much. I know we're a little bit past time here, and I appreciate everyone who stuck it through to the end. Please feel free to email us at AANMC if you have any additional questions. We're always willing to help folks out as they journey through their path to becoming an ND. So Dr. Khalili, thank you again for joining us, and I'll stay on for a few more minutes if there are any last additional questions. Thank you all, and thank you, Dr. Khalili.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been a pleasure.